Hi, welcome to Fort Collins Startup Week 2021. Today's session is Breaking the Silence, Mental Health and Entrepreneurship. My name is Krista Berry. I am a keynote speaker and author of the book, Beautiful Badass, How to Believe in Yourself Against the Odds, a book in which I tell my story of growing up on welfare, living in poverty, and overcoming depression. In addition to my work as an author and a speaker, I am also the founder and CEO of She Goes High, a Northern Colorado women's leadership organization focused on introverts. Now, through my own personal experience, as well as my work with the She Goes High community, I know that mental health is an issue for so many entrepreneurs. And it's actually much more prevalent for mental illness to be seen in entrepreneurs than in the general public. So I want to start off by just sharing some information with you around the statistics on mental health, because I feel this conversation is so important for us to be having. We need to be destigmatizing mental health and conversations around mental health, especially as entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are 50% more likely to report having a mental health condition than members of the general public. That means that within Fort Collins Startup Week, you're likely to find twice as many people who are experiencing a mental illness of some kind. In fact, let's break it down even further. According to the research, entrepreneurs are twice as likely to suffer from depression, 6 times as likely to suffer from ADHD, 3 times as likely to suffer from substance abuse issues, and 10 times more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder. So entrepreneurs are dealing with mental illness at a rate much higher than the general public. And I want you to know, if you now are dealing with some kind of mental health crisis, or you ever have, you are normal. You are normal. There is nothing wrong with you. You have a mental illness or dealing with a mental health condition, and it is more common than you think, even amongst the general public, but especially as an entrepreneur. But of course, as the face of our business, so much of the time, there's this pressure to feel like somehow I have to look like I have it all together. That showing some kind of weakness, that accepting or talking about mental illness might somehow make me seem less credible as a business owner, less credible as a leader. And I don't believe that's true. And I think these statistics really back that up when you consider the fact that entrepreneurs are 50% more likely to report having a mental health condition. And let me put an emphasis on the word report. So how much more prevalent is mental illness in entrepreneurship if we have 50% more likely to report it? And there's probably some entrepreneurs that just weren't comfortable admitting what's really true. So why is this so relevant for entrepreneurs? I can take a guess at some reasons, as well as look at some interesting information that they found in some studies that they've done. So looking at the studies that they've done, some of these reasons are believed to be the additional stress that entrepreneurs face, the isolation that is so prevalent with entrepreneurs, especially those of us just starting out or in a solo business. Many of us are predisposed to mental illness. And in fact, Based on my own experience and the experience of many of the entrepreneurs that I know, as well as the entrepreneurs I know within the She Goes High community, I believe this predisposition is really important because I think that people who struggle with mental illness have an even harder time making traditional employment situations work long term. And the idea of going into business for ourselves, of having more freedom, of having more autonomy, flexibility of scheduling, I think all of these factors are attractive, especially to someone who is dealing with or has ever dealt with a mental health condition. Other reasons include uncertainty. We know as entrepreneurs, there is so much uncertainty. Now, I personally believe that life is full of uncertainty, even when you hold traditional employment. But with entrepreneurship, that's just a little bit more emphasized. That feeling of uncertainty, of not knowing exactly when your next paycheck is coming, in many cases, or how much it's going to be. And when we do have a loss of business, COVID resources aside, many of us have fewer protections in place, such as unemployment, wage and hour laws, and other protections that apply to traditional employment. Other reasons that entrepreneurs are showing up at higher rates for mental health conditions include shame through impression management, or that idea of, I have it all together. It's that pressure to feel like I have to seem competent all the time. And that somehow this old idea that we have, that admitting we have any kind of illness, particularly a mental health condition, somehow implies that we don't know what we're doing, that we're not competent. And I personally do not believe that that's true. Another reason that entrepreneurs are showing up with greater rates of mental health condition is barriers to mental health resources. Now, if you have ever dealt with a mental illness, you know that barriers to mental health resources exist across the board. And it's especially true not only for minorities and underprivileged populations, but within entrepreneurship, because we don't typically have the same access to group health insurance plans that might have a slightly more robust offering of mental illness coverage, as well as many employers also have employee assistance programs and other types of resources that give employees options for getting help for mental illness. But as entrepreneurs, access to that is a lot different than it is when you're traditionally employed. And there's one more reason that's been shown why entrepreneurs may experience a higher rate of mental illness. And that is the identity and self-worth that is tied to our business. You feel so passionate about what you do. You are the face of your business. And our identities can become so intertwined with the success of our business, so that when things are going well, we're feeling great and on top of the world. And when things are going not so well, when there's challenges and struggles, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we can internalize that to feel as though there's something wrong with us. And that if we were somehow a little bit better, we could be making our business more successful. So those are some reasons, both reasons that have been shown from the research, as well as some of my personal reasons that I have experienced, as well as seen in my communities, for why mental illness is reported to be 50% more likely within entrepreneurs. Again, I want to reiterate for you, as you're listening to these statistics, as you're considering these reasons, that if you are now or have ever experienced a mental health condition, you are normal. There is nothing wrong with you. Mental illness is not a personal failure, nor is it a business failure. As I mentioned before in the beginning, I have personally experienced mental illness. I grew up in a family where mental illness was very prevalent, and I myself have experienced depression and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I've experienced these challenges my whole life and have had firsthand experience, not only through the lens of the mental health conditions that I have been challenged with, but also those of my family and the people around me. I feel very fortunate to have had access to mental health resources from a very young age. In fact, I first started seeing a counselor when I was about 8 years old. And I have made it a priority in my life to continue to seek out mental health resources and support my entire life. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do so. And guess what? Even with all of those resources, even having access to those resources from such a young age, mental illness still hangs me up sometimes. And that doesn't make me less impactful in my work. It doesn't make me less credible. I continue to be good at the work that I do. I continue to make a difference in this world. I continue to impact the lives of others, not just despite my mental illness, but oftentimes in collaboration with it. So I want to share with you some strategies for mental wellness, because the first part of this conversation is about breaking the stigma, about having an open and honest conversation and saying that having a mental health condition is not wrong or bad. It does not make you less than. But I don't want to leave you hanging there. I want to give you some strategies for mental wellness so that as the face of your business, as an entrepreneur, you can show up for yourself, for your team, for your customers, your clients, for the public in a much more healthy and integrated way as someone who may struggle with a mental health condition. So some strategies for you, including connecting with the business community. Entrepreneurship can be incredibly isolating. And those ups and downs, that roller coaster ride that so many of us experience on a day-to-day basis, really can be a lot to manage. And I absolutely hope that you have support through your personal community. And I'm going to talk about that more next. But right now, I want to focus about your professional community. Because here's the thing, other entrepreneurs, other business owners are going to understand those ups and downs. They're going to understand that roller coaster ride in a way that people who have never been in business for themselves may not fully understand. So when you're reaching out for connection and support and community, I strongly encourage you to build that within the business community, to connect with other entrepreneurs, to go to events like Fort Collins Startup Week, to join networking groups and other types of groups such as co-working, mastermind groups, group coaching program, where you can interact and connect with other people that are dealing with similar challenges and that understand that unique experience, that roller coaster ride, that feeling like one moment you've just signed a big contract and you're riding high, to sometimes within that same day feeling like a complete and total failure. And then back up again. I mean, this experience of entrepreneurship is a ride that is like no other. So get connected within the business community, get connected with other entrepreneurs. I will tell you, in addition to being the founder and CEO of She Goes High, I also have very strong relationships with other entrepreneurs. I have a handful of entrepreneur friends, I like to call them my friendpreneurs, that we have standing monthly lunch, happy hour, dinner dates. And what I love about these connections is that opportunity to laugh together, to cry together, sometimes literally cry over a sangria swirl at Blue Agave, and sometimes less literally, but to be able to have a peer who understands what you're going through, to talk about the ups and downs, to share in the celebrations and those big wins, and also to just be present and hold space for you when you're having a rough time, when it feels like it's a little bit too much. And to be able to know that the problems that you are facing with your mental wellness, that you are not the only one. You are not alone. So I have these monthly friendpreneur dates with a variety of entrepreneur friends, and I value these relationships so highly. In addition, within She Goes High, the women's leadership group that I founded and run, we have regular conversations about mental health. Now, you're not necessarily going to find many groups like She Goes High that have a focus on talking about mental wellness, but I invite you to be open-minded and look for groups that are offering that level of support. And even outside of talking directly about mental wellness, even just being interconnected within the business community can be really supportive to your mental health. And of course, that's a little bit harder right now during a pandemic because everything has gone to Zoom. And first of all, Zoom fatigue, am I right? But also sometimes the quality of the relationships don't feel quite as rich in a Zoom environment as when you have the opportunity to meet people in person. But that's exactly why it's more important than ever to be proactive about being connected within your business community, about attending events like Fort Collins Startup Week, where you can be educated on many different elements of entrepreneurship, from hard business skills to soft business skills, to talks like this one, where we are addressing mental wellness as an entrepreneur. If you find yourself feeling isolated, feeling disconnected, my invitation to you is to take one step to get more connected within the business community. Reach out and take that one step. And the first step is almost always the hardest one, right? Another strategy for mental wellness is to connect within your personal community. So this might be where you get involved, maybe with hobby-based meetup groups, finding other people that enjoy hobbies that you enjoy. Getting involved, maybe you have a church group that you really like, or some kind of support group. Being more connected within your larger community, especially within your larger personal community, is really important to maintaining mental wellness. And again, we're in a pandemic. So being able to do this is actually a lot harder right now than it typically is. And it's also more important than ever. So again, my invitation to you is to make that extra effort to maintain and build those relationships. Reach out to a friend or family member that you haven't heard from for a while. Just connect, check in with them, see how they are doing. Being of service to other people is a great way to get out of our own head and our own experience and just getting trapped inside the perspective that you happen to be dealing with today. So reaching out to that person you haven't talked to in a while, a friend, a family member. And I invite you to reach out to them in different ways. Maybe pick up the phone and call them on the phone. Text messaging can be a great resource. And as an introvert, I honestly love text messaging. I don't always love when people just call me up out of the blue. But if a friend did call me up out of the blue, I would absolutely take their call. And if they texted me to say, hey, I'd like to talk on the phone sometime this week, that would be amazing to me. So this is your opportunity to get connected individually with people in your life. And I know that we can't connect in the same ways that we were before, pre-pandemic, while we're still going through this, but there are opportunities to connect. And then connecting within your personal community. Hobby-based meetup groups are still happening. Yes, they're primarily happening on Meetup or on Zoom, I mean. And so maybe you might be feeling like, ugh, I just can't do another Zoom meeting. I'm going to challenge you to go ahead and reach out and sign up for, yes, one more Zoom meeting, and really show up with the intention to be surprised and delighted by the connection that you're going to make, by the fun that you are going to have. And connecting with your support groups, with your church groups, maybe even doing some volunteering right now. Volunteering is another really great way to feel more connected and engaged within your community. It helps alleviate that feeling of isolation or of like, I'm alone in what I'm struggling with. When you can reach out a helping hand to someone else, whether you're doing that virtually or in person, socially distanced with masks, those opportunities are still out there right now. You're going to feel better connected and less isolated. And that is going to support your mental wellness. Now, if a resource that you're looking for doesn't exist, create it. You are an entrepreneur, and you know what you're great at? You're great at coming up with ideas and creating new things that didn't previously exist. So if there is a lack in your business community locally or a lack in your personal community right now, and you just can't find what you are looking for, that level of connection, you go out there and make it happen, which is exactly what I did with She Goes High when I started this organization about 3 years ago. I had been a part of a lot of different types of networking groups, and I did find value in many of them, but as an introvert, none of them felt quite right to me. And so I started She Goes High to be the group that I had been looking for so much of my professional life, both when I was traditionally employed in a corporate career and as I started my own business as a business owner. I loved many of the different professional associations and networking groups that I was a part of, but I was still missing something. And that is what I created in She Goes High. I created a group, a women's leadership group that is focused on being welcoming and inviting and friendly to introverts. And if you happen to be an introvert, you probably know and you've experienced throughout your life that so much of the world is designed toward extroverted preferences. And we learn to adapt and we learn how to fit into that box, as it were. And I flipped that script with She Goes High and designed a leadership group that is focused on introverted preferences. And that relates to the structure of the group. It relates to how we run our meetings and how we interact with each other and the types of topics that we talk about. Now, we welcome extroverts at She Goes High, just as much as introverts are welcomed at all of those other more traditional networking groups. The main difference that you're going to find within She Goes High is that we are designed for introverted preferences, and we love our extroverted friends that show up anyway. So if a resource doesn't exist, if you're looking for it and you are getting frustrated or discouraged and thinking, there's just no place that I really feel like I fit in that is for me, I invite you to create it. Because you are an entrepreneur, you have great ideas, you're amazing at making things happen, you are so brilliant. And if that resource doesn't exist, you have an opportunity to create that for yourself and for other people like you that are looking for that resource, just like I did with She Goes High. Another really important strategy for mental wellness is to talk about your mental health. And I have experienced this time and time and time again. So one thing we do within the She Goes High community is we have conversations like this. We have events where we're talking about mental health. We also, within our She Goes High Impact membership, we have a Mental Health Monday where we have an opportunity to check in once a week and say, where's my mental health at today? And I know how hard it is as an entrepreneur to stand up and say, I'm struggling right now. And here's the thing, these greater statistics that I talked about at the beginning of this conversation, this applies during non-pandemic times. During non-pandemic times, which are inherently more stressful, entrepreneurs are 50% more likely to report having a mental health condition. But right now, during a pandemic, more people than ever are experiencing burnout, fatigue, depression, anxiety. So this is happening to so many of us, and it can feel like I just have to pull it together. I just have to get through this next thing. If I come out and admit that I'm struggling right now, what might people think of me? I know that feeling and I have lived it. And in fact, as recently as this last week, I was experiencing that feeling because I was having a little bit of a hard time at the beginning of the pandemic. Okay, wait, let me rewind. I say I was having a little bit of a hard time, but the truth is I was actually really, really struggling, really hovering at a barely survival level at the beginning of this pandemic. Then I started to feel better. Around November, I really started to feel better. I was feeling stronger. I wasn't struggling. I had moved out of survival and had moved into, I'm doing all right. I wasn't quite at thriving, but I was in that I am living my life. I feel healthy and well. I'm doing okay. But then within the last couple of weeks, I've started to notice my mental wellness declining. And I've started to feel like, oh gosh, I'm not really doing that well. And there was all this internalization and self-judgment, like judgment around, but things are improving. I should be feeling better. That itty bitty shitty committee in my head saying things to me like, oh God, can't you just get it together, Krista? Or people are really going to start to think that you are not cut out to be the leader of this women's organization. And so I didn't really share that I was struggling with very many people. I really was keeping it to myself. And here's the thing is mental illness thrives in isolation. It thrives in shame. And so I did something that was really hard for me to do. And I went out to the She Goes High Impact member community and I admitted that I was struggling and that it just felt important for me to speak that out loud and to own that and be witnessed in it. And almost immediately after making that post, I started to feel better. And I've had this experience over and over again, that isolation and that shame, when that's what's going on for me, mental health conditions thrive and they get worse. And the hardest thing in the world sometimes is to talk about it. But when I do, that's the moment that I start to feel a little relief. And that relief starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger because no longer am I isolated and no longer am I in that place of shame. I'm not listening to the itty bitty shitty committee. I'm listening to the person that I've just shared this information with, who maybe just embraces me with a warm hug and a virtual hug these days, but nevertheless, a warm hug. Or for that person who says, I'm so glad you said something because I'm actually experiencing that too. So a great strategy for mental wellness is to talk about it. I also want to talk about self-care beyond the basics. So in my book, Beautiful Badass, How to Believe in Yourself Against the Odds, I have a section where I talk about basic self-care. And then I talk about self-care beyond the basics. So what does that really look like? So basic self-care is literally taking care of your basic human needs. eating, sleeping, right? Brushing your teeth every day, taking a shower. Those are basic self-care techniques. And when you're in a mental health crisis, sometimes just those basic things can feel very overwhelming. So if that's where you're at today, my invitation to you is to start with the basics and just do the best that you can to take care of yourself at a very base level. And if you happen to be doing a little bit better right now, yay, I'm glad to hear it. And this is a time where you can move beyond the basics of self-care. So going beyond the basics of self-care include things like setting boundaries, saying no not only in your personal life, but also in your professional life. Saying no to clients, firing that client who's just been a huge pain in the ass that wants more and more and more, and they never seem to be happy with what they get. Fire that client. Say no to that person who's asking you to do one more thing right now. Here's the tweak about mental wellness that the pandemic has impacted us all. Most of us are doing more with less resources right now. So when I give my talk on work-life balance, typically I talk about the difference between what is necessary in your business, what's a nice to have in your business, and what is ideal in your business. And so in my work-life balance talk, I really dive into identifying those different categories. And the ideal stuff I talk about, give yourself a break and stop trying to do all of the things that are ideal in your business and really focus on what's necessary and nice to have. Well, right now we're in a pandemic, and here's the thing. I want you to focus on what's necessary and forget the rest. So if someone is making a request of you and you are already feeling under-resourced, my invitation to you is to say no. Saying no is advanced self-care. And here's the thing, the more you respect your time and expertise, the more you respect yourself as a business owner, the more that your clients will respect you. Get rid of those people that are draining your time, money, and energy. Okay, that's advanced self-care. Self-care is not just bubble baths and, naps. I mean, it can include those things. I'm a big fan of the nap myself. But it's so much more. So talking about strategies for mental wellness, really focusing on your self-care. Ramp up your self-care. If you're at that level that meeting your basic needs is difficult, then focus there and give yourself a break for not doing more. And if you're beyond that point where your basic needs are being met, if you're like, great, my basic needs are being met, then focused on those more advanced self-care items and go beyond the basics and really support your mental health and wellness. Even if you're not currently in a mental health crisis, it's that sustainability of your mental health that is important, because it's much harder to get help when we're way down in the dumps and much easier to have a really great support system, a really great, robust self-care practice, a really great community of people that you can talk to that will help you have fewer mental health crises. And when they do come up, will help you navigate it just so much easier. And then the last strategy for mental wellness that I want to share for you is to get professional help. There are so many options out there right now for mental health resources. There's telehealth. A lot of therapists are now offering therapy. Some are doing it in person, I think, socially distanced with masks, but also doing it over the phone, over Zoom. You've got online apps now that you can get mental health, professional mental health help, as well as so many resources. Here within Northern Colorado, we have some great resources. Summit Stone is fantastic. I definitely recommend checking out Summit Stone if you're at the beginning stages and you're looking for what's the next level for me. And also the state of Colorado has created some COVID specific resources for mental health, and those are available at colorado.gov and say, Google find behavioral help and get connected with a therapist. Now, as someone who has received professional mental health help from a very young age, I can tell you, if you have tried counseling or therapy in the past and it hasn't been a fit for you, please know that it's not always going to be a fit. Every therapist is not going to be the right therapist to work with you. So if you've had that experience and you're feeling discouraged, please keep trying, because you are worth it. Your well-being is worth it. And there is nothing wrong with you. You are normal. It is normal to experience these ups and downs. And if you happen to be one of those entrepreneurs that is 50% more likely to report a mental health condition, for you, that's normal. And it's not because you're defective or there's something wrong with you. It's not because you're not strong enough. It's not because you don't work hard enough. Trust me, you work hard enough. How do I know if I don't even know you? Because I am also an entrepreneur, because I lead a community of women, and I see how hard every woman that comes to one of our She Goes High events, I see how much of herself she gives. I see how hard she works every day. And I know that's true for you too. So I hope that you found some valuable nuggets in this conversation today, and that there's at least one takeaway. There was really a lot of information packed in here right now. And here's what I know about attending events like Fort Collins Startup Week or like workshops, is sometimes we can get really overwhelmed with a lot of great information, and we have the intention to do something about it. We have the intention to take action steps once we get home or later that day or later that week. And oftentimes what happens for many of us is we get overwhelmed with all that we've learned, or we get back to the regular part of our business and get overwhelmed with requests or work or client calls or whatever is happening. And we set what we learned to the side. And we tell ourselves, I'll do that later. And if we have too many action items that we intend to move forward with, that can also push us into overwhelm. We don't know where to start, or we try to take too many action items at one time. We try to take that on, and then we're not really effective at any of them. And then maybe we've learned all these great strategies, not just from my talk, but maybe other talks you've watched. And then you're like, whoa, none of this is working. So my invitation to you is to pause and choose one action item that you're going to move forward with. Whether it's something from this talk or something from another presentation that you viewed this week, pick one thing and make a commitment to that one thing. Make a commitment to do that choose a time period. Maybe it's a week. Maybe it's 2 weeks. Maybe it's a month. Start simple, start small, pick one action item, one takeaway that you really want to work on integrating, and make the commitment to yourself to do it. So I hope there has been something in this talk today that was for you. Maybe the action item is not from this talk. Maybe what you got out of this was just that reassurance that you are normal, that there's nothing wrong with you, and that you are not alone. And if that's what you got out of today, I am so pleased. And if there was an action item that just really stood out for you, like maybe it was one that you were excited to try, or maybe it's one that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, because oftentimes when people give us suggestions, sometimes those ones that are the ones we need most are the ones that make us feel the most uncomfortable. It doesn't matter where you start somewhere. Start small and start today. Thank you so much for engaging with me on this topic today. It has really been my pleasure to share this information with you. I am excited to talk about this topic more in the future at other events, and again at Fort Collins Startup Week. We have had this topic as a panel discussion for 2 years at Fort Collins Startup Week. This year, because we're virtually, I'm speaking to you just one-on-one, but we will be continuing to have this conversation. So thank you for being present to this. Thank you for caring about yourself and about others and making mental wellness a priority. I really appreciate your time today. My name is Krista Berry, and you can reach me at my website, liveandlovework.com. That's liveandlovework.com. I would love to hear from you. Please do reach out. Thank you so much for watching today, and I look forward to seeing you and meeting you, hopefully when we can get back in person again sometime very soon. Thanks so much.